Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting number 3 of fiscal 2024 on September 7th, 2023 here at Memorial Hall and Town Hall. First, I must read this announcement. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public, as well as members of the public body as well as members of the public may access the meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location posted, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the Zoom link posted in the agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely, as noted in the agenda. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28 and Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and is streamed live by Westborough TV. We thank them for their continued support. Hello, Jen. The first order of business is public comment, and I see no one here for comment. Okay, and for our note taker, we have, let's see, Melanie is remote, and everybody else is here except for Jean and Beth. So I think we're good to go. Okay, so our first thing is to discuss articles. I don't know, I guess we could do you first if you want to set up your laptop and get going.
Quick here.
So I think this one's a little more straightforward than the other one.
Yeah.
And so I'll introduce Jennifer Kirkland, our Recreation Director, and she will be talking about, to find which warrant article it is, but it's on the country club.
Yep. I don't know if you're supposed to be able to see this somewhere.
So we see something about the Westborough Golf Club?
Yep.
Yep,
That's
perfect.
it.
We see it
Perfect.
there.
Great.
And
Is that?
Yeah, we see them there.
Yeah. Is that good?
Can you guys see that on Zoom okay? Yes? Maybe?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
Well, David will have to share it to them.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, so this is
Oh, there it is.
actually going to be currently called Article 4, the fiscal 24 rec department budget adjust golf expense $7,000. So
Thanks.
take it away.
Hi, I'm Jen Kirkland. I'm the town's recreation director. Thank you for inviting me in tonight to speak a little bit about the golf course in this article. So this first slide is just the mission of the golf club. We strive to provide a premier municipal golf course for players of all ability levels and offer affordable memberships and greens fee, quality golf course, and a welcoming environment for Westborough residents and the area golf community. As Walter just said, this is, I didn't put the article number, but
'Cause it may
basically in
change.
summary, we're just looking to add $7,000 from the Golf Enterprise Fund to the credit card fees line. So this is just a little bit of some numbers here. So you can see in the first column there, that's total revenue of all payment methods over FY22 and FY23. You can see we're going in the right direction. The next column is what we have done in credit card transactions with a card not present. What that means is that we offer the ability for people to pre-book their greens fees online, so the card is not physically in the store, so that is card not present. Card present transactions are, you guessed it, when the card is in the pro shop, when people are buying greens fees in the pro shop, cart rentals, merchandise, snacks, all of that stuff. So you can see the total credit card transaction totals right there. You can see the fees that we've paid over the past 2 fiscal years. There's also a breakdown of what we're charged from our credit card processor. 2.75% if the card is in store, plus a 10-cent per transaction fee. And then if the card is not present, it's a 2.9%, and then a 30-cent per transaction fee. So why is there an increase? Volume drives the cost of the fees. We did just over $40,000 more in FY23 in credit card sales than we did in FY22. A big reason for this is because in November 2021, we started offering the option for people to pay for their memberships online. They used to be able to pay online through the town's like online check service, but we started in November 2021 to allow people to pay for their memberships with a credit card, which is something people have been asking for. So those memberships range from anywhere from just about $700 to the most expensive membership being $2,700. So you can see there, there's some pretty big dollar values that we're working with. So all the fees that we assess, we assess the fees at the start of each new golf year. So Matt and myself, we take a look at, other golf courses in the area, market rates, inflation, and what expenses the golf course has. So usually this is done in December, January to be ready for the following golf season. We strive to cover all of our costs while still being an affordable golf course. We have talked before, and we've talked about this on the rec side as well, because anytime you use a credit card processor, as you know, you're paying a fee. To add some sort of convenience fee line to the customer, there's, I think, good and bad with that. We try to just fold that cost right into the fee that you pay for whatever you're buying, and just cover the costs that way rather than having a convenience fee. And that was it, my quick little presentation. So happy to answer any questions. Hopefully, it's pretty straightforward, but again, happy to answer whatever questions you might have.
A couple questions. Could you go back to the slide that actually showed the 3 different years?
Yeah.
The FY24 slide, or when you talk about the FY24 line, how much of the year has passed to reflect that 154 versus
July and August? It's from July 1 to present day.
Okay, so that's really just the 2 months, because you were talking about the golf year, and I didn't know how that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, meaning I should have said the calendar year, but that FY24 is July 1st to today.
Okay, so where it looks like the credit card total transactions went up by 40,000. Got that? That's a gain of 8%, 7%. But it looks like the credit card fees paid went up 60%. So, is there something in the change of the fee structure that we're having to eat, or that has changed? Why the costs have changed so much?
I'm not sure. Like I said, I think it's the memberships.
If it's remote, it costs more per.
Yeah, but
Still
again,
a dramatic
8% versus 60%.
Yeah, it does seem a lot.
Yep.
I can dig into the numbers a little bit more and come back, but
Yeah. So my thought is only in terms of making sure we're getting ahead of knowing what it's going to be in the coming years. The 7,000, I think it makes total sense. It's coming from the enterprise fund, so this isn't a cost.
Right.
But I'd like to know that I'd love to understand if we can get to where this is coming from, so we can know that 7,000 will be enough.
Sure. And I think too, we have a good handle on things down there at the golf course, but it's still continuing to hit like a learning curve to kind of see what trends. And yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on this going forward, knowing that it did jump so much. But I'm fairly certain that it shouldn't go. And then we can also look when we renegotiate the contract with Golf Now. I think this is a conversation that we can have about how do we keep these these costs, like the 2.75, if they come back and say, hey, it's 3%, trying to keep an eye on it that way. When we go back to negotiate the contract, it's something we can talk about as well.
Please go ahead. Someone else.
No, so the question I would have is, what was the budget for?
11,000.
Okay.
And you were able to pay for it?
Yes.
last
So
year
other lines
somehow?
that we didn't use, but after we were a little tight coming down to the end of the fiscal year, and so reviewing our reports, that was the line that we really blew through.
So 23, the budget was 11,000.
Yeah.
And then what was it? What is it in 24?
So I'm going to get
Same
confused.
budget?
So I put 11,000 again. So now I'm
Okay.
asking for 7 to make it 18.
So to make it equal to what was spent last year?
Yes, exactly.
Do you expect this year's revenue to be equal to last year's?
Right now it's trending, believe it or not, even with all of the rain, we're a little ahead. So I think going into 25's budget cycle, I may budget 20 and then look to reduce another line that maybe we're not using as much when I meet with Christy and I almost said Leah, but I don't know if she'll be here for that meeting.
Well, ultimately, if you have more revenue, you're expecting more expenses of this type.
Yep.
So you should be fine, because
Yep.
your bottom line is,
Pretty good.
the other 97% of that credit card money is going to your, coming in as income, and the 3% is the only part that's going away.
So my favorite part of the rec meeting we had was, being a finance committee and all, was that you said, to the point that we're running ahead. I think you said that when we spoke a couple of days ago, we'd lost 5 days because of the rain over year, but we were only running about $700 short
Yep.
at that time. So I realized your numbers.
And I think I was wrong with that report, because when I
You
ran
think it was
it,
even better?
yeah, it was better. Because the reporting can be a little funky with these prepaids, we
Yeah.
call them. So I don't think I had taken into account that revenues when I had talked to the commission. So I think my numbers today, I think we're a little ahead.
Well, and I think
So
that
it's
really
good, yeah.
speaks to how the club is being run really, really well right now. And I think that's a positive. I mean, all behind the 7 because they need it, but also because they're doing all the right things right now to compensate for it.
And it,
First,
I was just sorry, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, and it's Matt and the superintendent down there. A lot of courses, because of all the rain, even when it's a nice day out, can be unplayable, but Matt and Mike Hightower do a really good job down there, so.
So you talk about the FY24 being 2 months. What is the golfing year?
We say, I mean, if anyone golfs, the golfers are trying to get out there in March. So we say middle of March to at least the end of November, but we can push it if we have a mild December. Sometimes we'll stay open.
So that's about 8 months-ish.
I'd say, yeah.
So that we can multiply that 44 by about 4 to give us an idea of kind of where we're headed, which is, if that's 2 months,
The
and
one,
the average.
the 160 or 150.
Well, and it drops dramatically. I think.
Sure, the 160, sure.
Not every month is created equal.
Exactly. Yes. Thanks, Rod. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So like when you start getting, and then the days get shorter as well,
Yeah.
so we can't play as long. So as we get into, October, I don't know when daylight savings is. In the beginning of November, especially, the golf day gets a lot shorter, and there are a lot less. I mean, there's still people golfing, but it's not like it would be, in July.
So that straight 4, obviously, while it sounds like we're running ahead, it's not running crazy ahead.
No,
right?
we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have a better idea, at the end of the fall.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Josh, questions? No? Questions? Melanie, question? No? Anybody else? Okay, I think that's great information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
so much. And I'll hang
coming
around.
in. You're gonna stay for this
Yes,
one, because
and it'll
you're related to the
Yeah,
next one
it'll
too.
be the Jen Miller show, but I'll be here for backup.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. And the next article is the currently called Article 10, the Lake Chauncey External Load Analysis, co-proffered by the Conservation Department and Rec Department. And so we'll introduce Jennifer Miller, our Conservation Director, who is remote, and let her do a presentation on that.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And it'll definitely be a Jen and Jen show, which is great. So when in doubt in Westborough, we guess Jen now, right?
Yeah.
Look, can you see my screen okay?
Yes. Next steps,
Okay,
watershed analysis.
Oh, whoops.
There we
Okay,
go.
let's try this again. That better.
Yep, now we see.
Perfect. So I have a handful of slides I'm going to run through. I promise not to bore you too much with the science, but I wanted to make sure you all have some of the background and understand kind of what we've done already at this point, and why we need to move forward with this next step. So as you all know, Lake Chauncey has some water quality issues, and it's not necessarily something that is specific just to Lake Chauncey. A lot of water bodies in this area and throughout the region experience the same issue when we get into the warmer months in the summer, and especially the shallow water bodies, because they don't have that depth to keep that colder water at the lower levels and to stay oxygenated throughout the summer. So what we're seeing in the pictures here doesn't look so great, and it's not so great for health reasons either. So this is a blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. It's something that occurs naturally in water, and in low levels or moderation, like a lot of things in life, it's fine. But the problem that we have is either because of environmental conditions, like I just mentioned, as far as warm weather or sunlight, it can cause concentrated blooms, and then those concentrated blooms produce toxins at a really high level. And there are other factors that also can cause these blooms, and some of those are human impacts. So things like high phosphorus and nitrogen loads can definitely cause those blooms to be even stronger than they would normally be. So some of the impacts to both humans and pets, obviously it has human impacts to wildlife as well, but we're focusing in on kind of the human impact related impacts. So skin contact and eye contact can cause irritation, can cause inhalation problems, especially for those with breathing or respiratory issues. Even ingesting a small amount can cause GI issues. Large amounts can cause much bigger problems, so liver issues, neuro issues. And those most affected tend to be the elderly, small children, pets, people who are more vulnerable and have smaller systems. So as far as the current issue at Lake Chauncey, this is information that you may have seen before when the 2021 annual town meeting had a warrant article presented for this initial study to be done. So there are algal blooms as recently as 2011, 2016 through 2019. And then in 2019, at the end of the season, they actually had to cancel swimming lessons. I'm sure, Jen can speak to the impacts that had to the kids who weren't able to participate in the program, and probably a lot of upset parents too. In 2020, 2021, and 2023, the town treated with what's called enhanced copper sulfate. It's a very standard treatment that's used. It's EPA approved. It actually is used in drinking water supplies, and that was done through Solitude Lake Management. They continue to have a contract this summer as well, so 2023. In 2022, it was not done, and that's because we were doing the initial study that was approved at the 2021 town meeting. So treating with the copper sulfate and lowering those algal blooms would skew the data that we were trying to collect. So it wasn't done in 2022. So through that comprehensive study, we got some great baseline information. I would say none of it is really shocking information or surprising, but it gave us that baseline data that we need in order to kind of expand from there and look at the problem more holistically. So, we saw that in the summer months, because it's a shallow water body, the temperatures, with those higher temperatures, it tends to, the lake stratifies. So that means when you get to those, to the lower depths, you have a lot less oxygen. It's being eaten up very quickly. And when that's the case, you kind of get in this anoxic condition, and that nutrient cycling causes these even greater algal blooms that I mentioned earlier. Conductivity. So every water body, whether it's a stream, lake, or river, has dissolved solids in it. And some of those are naturally occurring, so from leaf litter and soil, and other things are introduced, again, through human impacts. So in stormwater, you might see motor oil and those sort of things. So the dissolved solids in Lake Chauncey in 2022 measured between 347 and 631. Anything over 100 is considered to show impacts from human disturbance, and anything over 500 would be considered excessive. Total phosphorus levels were very high at levels that are known to support algal blooms and also indicate a potential stormwater issue. And then the same with total nitrogen. So high ammonia concentrations suggest that there's some sort of outside factor that's putting a lot of nitrogen into the system, such as maybe like a golf course or agricultural use. Again, so it's giving us that baseline data so we can start kind of figuring out, is this an in-lake issue or potentially an out-of-lake issue? So when we start to look at stormwater contributors and out-of-lake issues, We have two different types of pollution that we look at. We have point source, so that's something coming from, say, a wastewater treatment plant, factory. And then we have non-point source. So those are kind of broader, coming over a wider expanse of the landscape, even if they get concentrated eventually into a stormwater system or through a stream or a creek that runs into the lake. So for instance, as you go through a suburban neighborhood, stormwater is going to pick up a lot of leaf litter, dirt, and with that, potentially fertilizers and other nutrients, and it's going to bring those ultimately to the lake. Same with urban areas. Urban areas, you get less leaf litter, you're going to get a little bit more motor oil and those sort of things, maybe some brake dust. Rural areas, you tend, if it's farm areas, you're going to have potentially higher nitrogen and phosphorus levels depending on what type of crops and if we're talking about livestock or feedlot. In talking with the stormwater project manager that did this evaluation, I was actually surprised to learn that the suburban areas tend to be one of the biggest contributors in terms of those pollutant loads with all the leaf litter and everything that that leaf litter picks up. That was surprising to me. So this is an aerial overview of Lake Chauncey and kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what we have around us. There is a lot of open space around Lake Chauncey, but there's also in the few areas where we do have streams or waterways entering into Lake Chauncey, we have to remember that those feed from bigger areas. As the stormwater outlets contribute into that or flow into that stream, they ultimately flow to the lake. And then we do have some sports fields and we do have some agricultural fields at the northern or the top portion. So the next step, so now that we have this baseline data, the next step is to kind of look at, before we implement a longer term treatment. And those longer term treatments tend to be either like a water oxygenation system. So we're bringing oxygen into the water so it's not depleted at those lower levels. Or we do this, what's called an alum treatment, which inactivates that phosphorus. Those treatments can be costly. So we're talking potentially a $200,000 price tag, but remember right now we're spending between $15,000 and $20,000 a year for treatment. So if we get 15 to 20 years out of that treatment, for that longer term treatment, then we come out ahead. But that longevity and effectiveness of that treatment can be greatly reduced if we don't control those inputs. So what's coming in through stormwater and overland. So the watershed analysis would take an in-depth look and do a very site-specific watershed model and really look at the different types of land uses within the watershed, look at the stormwater infrastructure and how that's functioning, if there are potentially contributors from those areas, and then also septic systems. So much of Westborough is on sewer, but there are some septic systems out there, and we would want to look at those within the watershed as well. And so that really site-specific watershed analysis will look at, like I said, the land uses, where potential exceedances are coming from, and recommendations on whether to manage them potentially at their source. So that would be a source control, or manage through infrastructure, and that's the structural control. Structural controls can be costly, but there is also a lot of infrastructure funding available out there right now. So this is a good time for us to be looking at this. And another aspect that they'll look at is looking at the lake to watershed ratio. So in other words, if this watershed is contributing a lot more water to this small water body proportionally, then it's also going to be contributing at a higher pollutant load, and just trying to maybe look at scenarios where we can either reduce the amount of water that's going to this water body, redirecting it, or greater recharge, and other ways that we can improve this. So I hope I didn't bore you too much, but I just wanted to give a little background and context to this, and then leave plenty of time to ask questions. And if you want to look more closely at any of the slides, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody? I have one question. What's the effect of like a year like this where we had a lot of rain, which is not just coming in through the watershed, but directly falling in the lake? Does that that change all? Did it change it a lot this year? Did we end up having to treat this year, and have we treated this year? I think you said yes.
We have treated this year. And, you know, when you initiate the contract, it's, you know, so this is a decision that Jen has to make from a recreation perspective. And we did talk about it back in April, even March timeframe when we first got this, the initial report back from Woodard and Curran. You know, do we treat again, or are we going to be doing more analysis this summer? And we knew we weren't going to be ready to do more analysis this summer, so she moved forward with treatment, and I think that was the smart decision. Of course, we didn't realize we were going to have this very, very wet summer. But, you know, despite that, yeah, are things a little bit more diluted because we had so much water flowing to the system? Yes, but we also have a lot of stormwater picking up even more pollutants and more dissolved solids. We didn't do any sampling this summer, so I can't tell you how different that data is. But that question is actually a really great one. So one of the things we didn't opt to do or ask for in this proposal, and Woodard and Curran steered us away from, was sampling, actual sampling. So we're doing proposing a watershed analysis, not additional sampling outside of the watershed, so at the outlets. Because it can be very skewed depending on the year and even depending on the week or the month in terms of precipitation.
So thank you for that presentation. It's something that I've always wondered about, exactly what's going on there, and I thought you presented it very concisely. But since this is the Finance Committee, I'll ask you a finance question instead. And I guess that is, you know, how do you evaluate the number that you get for a proposal like this, and what would be the advantages and disadvantages of getting more than one number?
So we have the initial proposal, and we certainly can have you know, additional quotes. I think this one's pretty reasonable given what they're looking to do as far as that watershed analysis. Initially I was surprised at how low it was, and then as I read on, and there's a point in I don't know if you all had a chance to read through it, but in the proposal there's a clarification where they clarify that they're not doing the sampling, and that's why it's so much lower. The sampling can get quite costly because you're doing a wet sample, a dry sample, and sometimes multiple depending on where the location of each sample is.
Thank you.
And those all go to the labs for analysis.
So as a byproduct of the nutrition analysis that was, that you mentioned from 21 approval that was done in 22, were there any takeaways or recommendations as part of that study that we could implement and sort of start making a difference here?
Well, so one of the recommendations is to move forward with this next round, which is that site-specific watershed analysis. They also recommended doing additional data collection, and that's kind of what I was speaking to earlier, where Jen and I had to have that conversation. Do we do some additional analysis over the summer, like collect more data in the same area of the lake, or do we allow treatment to move forward and have it open for recreational purposes while we, you know, do some additional research and some additional discussions with Woodard and Curran. I needed to feel comfortable that this was the right step. I'm a scientist and I like data, so the fact that they weren't initially including sampling was surprising to me, but after I talked through it with them and came to understand that this watershed analysis actually gives a lot more accurate information and recommendations than the sampling does. The sampling you really need to do for multiple years over time, and like I said, that gets very costly.
Thank you.
So I think going in from 2021, when the first proposal came in, and looking at the previous conservation director's information and kind of preparation, like it was already very clear from Woodard and Curran that there was going to be a phase 2. 2021 was just a phase 1. And that's, like I said, that baseline data.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. It's just, again, being a finance perspective is that we spend $25,000 for a study that's going to tell us to spend another $27,000 on a study, and I love the data, but it seems that there's a lot happening that's not treating the pond that we're spending for, and I think we look to, like scientists, to make sure this is the right way to go, but also we should be have an eye towards how are we fixing this problem, not just studying the bejesus out of it.
Right, so the idea would be that this next phase will look outside of the lake. So we have these inputs. So what we learned from the 2021 study, which was conducted in 2022, is that there are the nitrogen and phosphorus levels and even the conductivity indicate that you've got outside problems. So that's stormwater inputs and overland inputs. In order to do any type of a treatment long-term on the lake that's more than the Band-Aid that we're doing every summer, we have to look outside. And in order to be effective at treating outside, we need to know where our biggest problems are. So doing that site-specific watershed analysis will let us drill down to where those bigger problems are. Is it an agricultural problem? Is it sports fields? Is it our neighborhoods that input into the system? By knowing that, we can determine, is there a good structural treatment that we can put in place before we consider doing a costly, big price tag for a more effective but longer term treatment like the alum treatment. We don't want to spend, I think being fiscally prudent is the whole idea behind doing this. If we say, let's just spend the $20,000 on the alum treatment, but because it could last 15 to 20 years, but we only get 10 years out of it because we have so much that we're putting into the system that alum treatment's just not as effective as it should be, then it would have been cheaper just to do the annual treatment. And so we want to be effective in the method that we choose. And in order to be effective, we need to understand how this system is functioning and how it's being influenced.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I'll stop dominating. I'm sorry, I turned this over, but I also know we do have sports fields right next to it. Is there a conversation that could be had about what we're treating those sports fields with, because we know that there's a lot of nitrogen and whatever? Is there a conversation about what we're putting on those sports fields that maybe could start talking about? Is there a conversation we could start having about DPW looking at the storm drains up at the building where they're throwing up a dozen buildings over the next couple of years? Do those storm drains are they meeting capacity? It just seems like there's stuff that we could start doing. Although I admit I'm not the scientist to know that. I would love to know that I hear that there's something happening because we have data that maybe could move something. So, it's not really a question, just an observation for wanting to.
Yeah, I think though that we have the data right now. The data we have is in the lake. We don't have the data outside the lake. So looking again, that site-specific watershed analysis looks at the land uses in the area, and that will tell us, by looking at those land uses and the percentages, give us a better understanding. So with each land use, let's say an agricultural field, there's a coefficient that goes with that for the stormwater analysis of how much of a contributor it is in terms of phosphorus and nitrogen. Sports fields, there's a coefficient for that as well. And so it actually we'll get a very specific model out of it that will tell us where we should be focusing our efforts. I think you're right. We do want to have conversations, but we want to have them for the right purposes. Like, we don't want to chase sports fields and alter the program if that's really not the big contributor. And so that's why we really need to look at this outside as the watershed as a whole.
Rod?
Just in terms of what's being proposed, is there any field work associated with it? Or is this all just using existing maps, or where's the information coming from? That's the first question. Second question, what's the time frame for this to be done?
So a lot of it is computer modeling, but they do field work because they're going to go out and look at stormwater infrastructure. So as they're reviewing data that DPW will have in terms of the stormwater systems and looking at the mapping. There'll be specific areas that they'll see in their modeling that they want to take a closer look at. So they'll go out and look at those sites, and that will help inform the model and make the model even better. And then the same with the septic systems. So they'll do that same thing. So if, initially they would start out with the data of where do we have septic systems, and then if they're saying, okay, we have a lot of septic systems in this area, let's see what the reports look like in terms of any issues in these areas, or if some of them haven't been replaced recently, what does functionality look like out there? So there might be an instance where they're going out to look at systems, especially if they're larger systems, so more than just a residential use.
And
And the timeframe to get the report?
So if it's approved at fall town meeting, a lot of the work can be done over the winter months, and then I would imagine they would wrap up any field work in the springtime. And we should be able to have some final findings and a report, I would think before our next treatment cycle, which would start in May.
Thank you.
Jane?
So, along those lines, I was curious about the timing. So we approved this year's treatment in June because we had delayed it waiting on the results of this study. And so AFC had actually voted mid-June to fund this year's. I assume we then didn't budget for a treatment for next summer, and we're going to wait and make a decision at the end of the summer again for fiscal '24. Is that accurate?
Well, the end of the summer would be fiscal '25, so they could
Well,
put it in the budget.
I guess
in
the end of the
theory.
fiscal year for summer, right? Because
So
June
rec paid-
15th, we voted this year to fund the copper treatment out of AFC reserves. Because we hadn't budgeted pending this. But if we're looking at potentially something more expensive also, we can't fund $200,000 out of AFC reserves, which means we're likely stuck with, stuck is probably a more dramatic phrase than I wanted, but we're likely not going to be able to do a larger treatment next summer, even if we have the survey in time, because AFC reserves can't fund a $200,000 treatment.
Well, rec has paid for it in the past, and I know this past year we did go to AFC and ask for a reserve, but I think what ended up happening is the contract, it was dated July 1, so Leah actually said that I don't even think I wasn't able to use those funds, so rec will pay for it.
Okay.
So I think rec has my budget has the ability to, if we ended up having to be later and we missed Springtown meeting, that rec could pay for it.
Okay.
It's not something that we could do long-term, like Jen had said, we want to, and I think in just a little bit of history, when this started, the feeling of the Conservation Commission, the Select Board, was they were okay with this copper sulfate treatment, but they really did want to find the root cause. Let's get a long-term solution. So REC has the ability to pay for the copper sulfate for a couple years, but not every year, because it is pretty costly.
So probably the earliest that a long-term solution would be proposed is a year from now at that next fall town meeting,
Right. That's what I was
Okay.
just really
Yeah.
reasoning through, right? Was it already in the budget? Because it looks like regardless, we're going to end up doing that next summer or not treating, right, depending. And so that's what I was just questioning is, have we planned for that? Is there?
And a good question to remember as we're about to start the fiscal '25 budget, of which next
Right.
July and August will be part of, so
Right.
whether that's included or not is a good question.
Well, I guess, so then the expectation is hopefully, or the goal, is that hopefully we would have these, you said in spring. I mean, realistically not in time for the fiscal '25 budget process though, right? So really, if you're looking at either coming in October for an additional or the following years. So it's a pretty drawn out process.
Yeah.
I think we started in
But that- something like
21
that,
and we're looking at 26.
But the thing you're talking about, like doing whatever they're talking about, this $200,000 thing would normally not be just part of their budget. It would be
Right, that's why I was,
a capital item
Right.
of some sort.
I would
think,
assume.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess it takes.
Yeah, and I think you also have to remember though, even though it was approved in fall of '21, that's not the time of year that you're doing analysis, because that's not when you have the algal blooms. So you really, going into it in fall '21, there's the first chance you're going to have to do that is summer of 22. And yeah, I mean, I think with changeovers and staffing too, there's been additional delays. So, you know, a tighter timeline would have been great. But, you know, we are where we are, and we want to keep this moving forward. And I think, you know, long term, out of this study, even if we still need to do traditional treatment with the copper sulfate this coming summer, in summer of 24, and potentially summer of 25. The idea is that we're looking at, are there additional things that we're going to have to consider doing in terms of infrastructure outside of the lake, in order to make an in-lake treatment effective for the long term?
Yeah,
Right, so
I
it's
think
not
it makes
just-
a lot of sense to
it's not-
reduce what you're trying to fight before you try and cure it, right? Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Right.
maybe the sports fields, a different way of fertilizing or not fertilizing or something may have a big impact, and maybe that's something we would know in time for, I don't know when they put fertilizer on those sports fields, but you know, we're paying for fertilizer and to keep it out of the lake, so that might have an impact next year, or the year after, or something.
Correct.
Yeah, depending
And
on what you find.
it's also really relevant because there's all this additional infrastructure funding right now. So if we're looking at, you know, are there some stormwater infrastructure controls that we could put in place? This is an ideal time to be doing that.
So when they do this theoretical model, do they ask the people who would be doing those sports fields what they put down and what they do, or do they go, a typical sports field does such and such? Because I think that since we're the ones who own those sports fields, that information would exist. It could be an important part of the model.
Correct. Yep. So there'll definitely be communication with other departments. I think, you know, this is Board of Health, Conservation, and Recreation, you know, work to bring forward the first article. They've worked together to bring forward this next proposal. And, you know, I think there's a lot of collaboration that will continue to happen. Obviously, DPW will be brought into this conversation too, because we're talking about stormwater infrastructure.
So at the Board of Health's involved, you're up to 3 Jennifers. I think,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Well, the stormwater to me is especially important because they're
Yeah.
throwing up so many buildings at Del Webb.
Yeah.
So, like, if we need to get ahead or start thinking about infrastructure, let's do it before the buildings go up. And I would love to know that there's something we could think about identifying if that really is a potential problem, because it becomes a much more expensive problem if we wait.
Yeah.
I just say that because I don't know, I'm trying to think ahead to where this seems to be going.
I think most development now has on-site treatment that should limit the amount that gets into the lake.
And most
Limit the
development,
amount of,
and most development has affordable housing. How's that going for Del Webb? Okay, I'm just saying we should be thinking ahead for these things.
that's actually an interesting discussion.
Anyway, off topic. Melanie, any questions?
You know what, Andrew Bradley just covered it for me, because I was thinking the whole Del Webb thing as well. And I was wondering if when they brought to the town their idea for their initial development, had they not done any sort of kind of background and presented it to the town as to what their impact would be on the surrounding area?
So I think the initial comment was correct in that any new development has to meet certain stormwater standards. The state of Massachusetts, in addition to federal standards, has their own standards. And one of those requirements is that the velocities can't change when the stormwater is leaving your site as it was pre-construction. So there has to be some sort of stormwater infrastructure that's slowing down your flows. And adding all that impervious area in terms of structures and pavement and all that. And then also you have to remove at least 80% of your total suspended solids. So those were the dissolved solids that we were talking about. So the standard is 80%. A lot of systems will remove more than that depending on what type of storm event it is. And in the case of Del Webb, much of the stormwater from that development actually drains to a different watershed. It heads out towards the state hospital property, just because of how that infrastructure is set up over there. That's a whole different can of worms. So,
And who's monitoring the fact that they're supposed to? There could be state mandates all day long, but if somebody's not necessarily monitoring it, they can say they did it and they didn't necessarily do it.
correct. So, like many municipalities, Westborough usually involves a third-party consultant to do the initial analysis at the developer's expense. So in this case, Ty and Bond is involved in that review. And DPW, through the engineering division, won't sign off on a project until it's been evaluated by that third party and we know that it's functioning the way it was designed. And then between my department and DPW, we do annual inspections to make sure that those stormwater systems are being maintained. They have to turn in reports that show that they've had Vector trucks out to clear their catch basins. It's a pretty involved process, and I will say, having worked in other municipalities and other entities, even on the West Coast, that Westborough's got a pretty good system in place for the long-term monitoring. A lot of communities are pretty good with that construction monitoring period, but not after, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting at. And Westborough is pretty good about that.
Josh or Tom, any questions? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time and all your hard work. Appreciate your...
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Very good. I'll let you go. And-
Thank you.
Yeah. Good night, Jen. Good night, other Jen. Okay, so... adjust that for a few minutes. I wanted to talk a little bit about the schedule and upcoming things, and then we can come back and see if we wanted to vote those or not tonight. Give ourselves a minute to think. I don't need that. Let me try and share. And I want to get one. I guess I can't see that. Okay. Okay. And I'll hide that or something. So this is the most up-to-date I have as of a day or so ago. We had our guests tonight. I just wanted to go through the articles and give you an update on the schedule. So next Monday, we're going to have Christy Williams in. She probably won't be talking about Article 1 because as of at least a couple days ago, there were no prior year bills. So in which case, that one wouldn't be hard. But she'll talk about Articles 1, 3, the Finance Department budget adjust, and the opioid funds and the settlements of the Affordable Housing Trust, and go through those. Karen Henderson will also be here, the Westborough TV manager, to talk about their cable budget change. We've lined up Maureen Amiot on the library to come and talk about the library building management upgrade on the 14th, which is a week from today on Thursday. I do have an update. Last time I spoke about the potential for an AFC transfer for a fan that had caught fire in December. The town has been able to get that paid for by insurance. And so there's some deductible, but that's handleable inside the library maintenance budget. So that somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000 request will not be coming at this time, which is good news. On the 4 DPW directors, Chris Payan and the DPW are coming here on October 2nd, giving them a gap because some of theirs aren't quite ready yet. And that way, also, as Rod had mentioned to me, I've reached out to the planning board to see when they probably would have a public hearing on at least these 2 zoning articles, I think, and they would probably vote some form of what they think about it, and so that'll be more in time for town meeting. Melanie, have you had any discussions with fire police about a date yet?
I have not.
Okay.
Do you have a date specific, and I'll reach out to them?
I think ideally, if they could come
14th.
on the 14th, we could do them at the same time as the library.
Okay.
I don't think theirs is too long. I think it's, we just had Chief Minardi at the Civic Club meeting the Tuesday night, and he did mention the fact that they have an article, so I think they appreciate the opportunity to get some upfront publicity on it too. I think in terms of the fire department people, I think overall we've already heard that, but again, I think it helps to refresh the public why this is necessary, which is good. And if that doesn't work for them on the 14th, then it's probably sometime later. Let me get out the other schedule, sorry. Stop sharing that, I'll go to the schedule. And then also the schools, I think we want to take a look at. Where's the other one? There we go. Zoom.
If we ask, oh, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, if we ask them to come, either of the chiefs, is there a way that we can schedule them at the very beginning of a meeting, since their days are very, very long?
Yeah, well, that's what we've done with all the guests, that pretty much start the meeting as soon as we start, and we can do them first because they can get sometimes called away as well. And we can do the
Well,
library
no, but you
second.
said, were you potentially looking to do the, you're looking to do the library that day as well?
Yeah, well, we could do the library second and do them first. I mean,
Okay.
then that's as quick as we get. We're not like when they come to the select board meeting and they're 7th on the agenda and takes about 3 hours. I mean, it's still only not even 8 o'clock yet, and we've had 2 speakers. So I think we're pretty minimalistic on the time, but we could certainly have them go first. No problem with that. And generally, we've moved things like minutes approvals and all that other stuff to the end, so we get to the guests right away. Because I agree, they spend enough time working already. Just looking at the dates, I'm probably going to cancel Monday the 18th right now, because I don't think we need the meeting. We haven't added more to the warrant. On the 21st, we all will be meeting across the street as the kickoff of the fiscal 25 budget with the school board and the select board. Monday the 25th is a Yom Kippur and school closed, and so we'll probably not have a meeting that night. The following night, we're expecting the warrant to close, and so that gives us sort of 3 more meetings to, 4 actually, to vote on things before town meeting, but 3 before the R&R. So my thought was to ask the schools, we had talked about them coming in earlier, so maybe reach out to Amber and
I emailed
Dave?
Amber already.
Okay. And we have the DPW coming in, and we have a space where we don't know, we sometimes get citizens petitions or other things, or other stuff that comes up, or like someone suggested, maybe we need to hear back from the school again or something. I did get confirmation that the R&R has to go to printers on October 10th. Monday is a town holiday, so, and Fridays they work the half shift. So that kind of tells you that Thursday is certainly the last input on the R&R. I will be able to proofread things and do stuff like that over the weekend, and then have Celia wrap it up on that Tuesday morning, but that's pretty much for the R&R. So anything that happens either after that or gets complicated, we'll just have to announce at town meeting, if we end up meeting on the 12th, for instance, to review another article. But we kind of got that going. Okay, very good. And, okay, so I would suggest that if there's interest, we would vote on the start on the rec department budget, unless someone has, or multiple people have an objection to voting on that now. And hearing none, let me share the warrant so we can get a motion. Stop sharing. Probably a way to directly share, but I'm not that clever. Okay, so this is Article 4. So if someone would like to make a motion, or I could, if no one else wants to, but basically that we recommend the town do what it says here.
All right, I'll move that we recommend the town vote to raise or appropriate $7,000 from the Country Club Enterprise Fund to increase golf course expense budget to cover credit card fees.
Bradley, second.
Okay, and that was clapped with the motion. Very good. Okay, as part of our method of,
Good first.
anyway, any discussion? I'd also like for us to think through of why we are supporting or not supporting it as well, so that it can be captured.
So the question I forgot to ask, which I don't think influences my vote, but would be good to understand what the amount that's in the enterprise fund right now. Is it 7,000 out of $500,000 or 7,000 out of?
Yeah, well, we saw they brought in, what, $750,000 last year. What did they spend, I guess is the question.
Right.
And we could go back maybe to our budget book and see what it was at the end of June, because I think those are in that appropriation report that we got.
I'm confident there's
Yeah.
enough to cover the 7,000, so.
More than enough.
Yeah.
It's a couple hundred. Yeah, I think it's a couple 100,000.
Yeah.
Like they've
Yeah.
really beefed it up recently. They've been.
Jane's got to tell us. No pressure.
So I have just their expense transactions actually pulled up, but if their total expenses look to be almost $800,000 for the year, so in terms of their total expenses, it's a relatively immaterial dollar amount, so,
1%.
yeah, of their total
Or less.
expenses. And it's strictly tied to revenue generation, so. I also did the math, and it appears that what they're actually paying is less than the schedule she gave us in terms of fees, right? It was less than the 2.7 plus 10 cents or 2.9 plus 30 cents a transaction.
But how do you know how many transactions? Or you
Well,
guess?
I'm still under 3% on each of them, so
Oh,
certainly they
okay.
had transactions.
Yeah.
So it's still somehow averaging less than the published rates.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a sliding fee schedule, right? Meaning the higher
Some
volume,
of
the
them
less your
are,
fees are.
Yeah.
within a month, the first so many are
I
at
really
this
had
percent, yeah.
to avoid the urge to like dig into their credit.
Yeah,
The like
Thank you.
treasurer in me really wanted to question all of their
okay.
merchant
Yeah, that's
services.
a little bit in the
and
mud.
it was way too far in the weeds.
yes. We're not running the department.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Josh, any
Really
comment?
reined it in.
Make sure you're talking to a microphone, just for the,
I was going down the same path, actually. I think Andrew raised it, and I agree that it probably doesn't influence my vote tonight to get them the money and reconcile for the spend they've already incurred. But to Jane's point, it looked as if the years for fiscal '24, they were already at $5,000 paid on $150,000 in transaction fees. So either it is a sliding scale, or they've changed over the last few years what they're being charged. It doesn't seem to line up.
Yeah, so the total ends up at 2.47% in year one, 3.52% in year two, and this year they're at 3.19%. I'm really sorry. I can't not do the math.
that's
But yeah, so it is more expensive, although it is less than the total for last year. But the problem also is there's the card present, card not present transactions that are going to skew your total.
and right
She also
now,
talked
they
about
have mostly
prepaid.
not present.
What I'm wondering is if she's giving us the revenue total and the credit card fees and not the transaction totals, right? Because you wouldn't recognize the revenue on next year's greens fees, but you would pay the credit card fees on them at the time. So there might be a mismatch there in terms of how she's calculating it. Either way, the fees are relatively reasonable, right? In terms of the 30% is pretty stiff, or the 30 cents is a pretty stiff, but the percentage wise, it's not a bad
No.
fee, especially for our volume. And
But I
again,
would
it's
like to
tied to
know
revenue, so
more for next year's budget.
I know.
To make sure we cover it.
budget's gonna be really fun for me. That's when I get to ask all these ridiculous questions.
Okay. Is that a warning or a promise? I don't know which.
Maybe
So-
less fun
so
for
I-
you guys.
Yeah, so I think the justification in my mind is, some of this is as a result of having higher usage, so.
Yep.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And, yes, there have been similar problems at other places where you have extra revenue, but you have extra costs, right? We just went through this with another department, I think. I don't want to skip Melanie because we can't see her on the screen right now. Do you have any comments, Melanie? Or not? I just want to give you a chance to comment if you want to do it. That's all. 'Cause
She's talking but muted.
oh, you're muted.
I said Chief Purcell got back to me, he can do the 14th. And I haven't gotten with Chief Minority yet, but I will.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, I think generally, I mean, it makes sense to do because it's a cost of having gotten more revenue, and it makes sense to keep an eye on the future budget. Okay. That being said, is there any further comments? We'll go to vote. We have to do roll call because we have one not here, so let's see, who's, Beth's not here, so I think, Melanie, you're first.
Board, yes.
I think Bradley's next, right?
Yeah.
Bradley, yes.
And
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Shafford, yes?
and Leslie, yes, so that
Oh, I went
is.
too fast.
That's okay. A lot of times the chair goes last, just so we make sure that everybody voted.
Okay.
So that works fine, but that is, there's 7 of us, 7-0-0. And that passes on a motion. Okay, now to Article 10. And if someone would like to conjure up a motion on that.
You're killing it.
You did so well, Jane.
You guys-
She's got it in front of her, that's why I'm gonna let her.
That's free end cash.
All right. I would make, clap, I'd make a motion. We recommend the town
It's a free
vote
cash.
to transfer from free cash a sum of $27,500 for the purpose of engaging a consultant to further analyze water quality issues related to the nutrient loading within the watershed. related to external sources as part of an overall assessment and long-term management plan for Lake Chauncey.
Okay, is there a second?
Bradley, second?
Okay. So we have a motion and second. Discussion.
So, my only comment, and I'm not going to go down on my soapbox, is but I had a discussion with Walter in terms of we don't know what our free cash position is from last year. So I could make the argument that I don't want to vote on anything that takes transfers from free cash in an account I don't know how much is in it. That being said, I do see the need to vote this one now so we can get it done to keep this moving forward. So despite my concern about the free cash amount, I would still vote in favor.
Okay. I mean, it is a concern. I've reached out to the finance director, and she is working on getting those numbers. They're a little short. They are still short-staffed this summer. There's a new treasurer about to start, and she's working through the numbers and assures us she'll get us those numbers. My only recollection was we always seem to have what I would consider way too much free cash in that fund. So I can't imagine that this would make a big dent in it based on the last time we saw it anyway.
It's
but
more precedent than.
and so
What
I think is a fair compromise is if after we get that information and it's before town meeting and we think that it makes a dramatic change, we can of course always revote, including even at town meeting. And I'm sure the amount of free cash will be known before town meeting because that's one of the things they always have to present, right?
Well, and you did say if, which makes me a little nervous. I assume we can find out what the free cash balance is before the middle of October?
Yeah, we guess so. I believe so too.
Don't you get that monthly, review, or?
We just got the one for the end of the year. And again, she's
Got it.
she's
It's not
processing.
It's not final.
They're trying to catch up.
Okay.
So I think,
It does
in
say
fact, to
final.
that end,
It does say 5.
I'm participating in the interview of some candidates for that position, probably Monday. So they are moving forward with making sure that we don't, or hopefully making sure we don't have like a gap in the position too, which is another thing, because she's leaving at the end of October. Okay, any other comments? I mean, my comment is, I think like Chauncey's a real gem of a resource for the town, and it does make sense to do some long-term planning. I understand Andrew's frustration of the delay, but I'm starting to understand more and more that town things just go slower than you think. That it always seems to take longer than
I guess
we'd
it's-
like on a lot of things, and it certainly isn't as big a crisis like, sort of not having enough fire people on staff or something. It is something that can kind of plod along because it is more of a 20 or 40-year plan. But I
And
agree. Anything they could start doing is good.
Exactly. It's less frustration that this part is taking so long. Is that we don't seem to have any interim, it doesn't seem like the conversation's happening about things we could sort of preemptively get ahead on. Look at the fertilizer mix to see if there's saying let's lower nitrogen we could do, or it may not be making a huge difference, but the notion that we've only looked in the pond so we don't know what's coming out, it's like saying we don't know how the bullet got in there, but the guy with the gun, not sure how big the gun is. It just there's things you can do. Even if you don't know exactly how big the gun is, you can
Take
try and do
certain
something
steps
to-
based on
yeah.
theory, I guess.
Well, and my
So
thought,
I think it's fair to say in the R&R, we're in favor of the
Yeah.
idea, but would also like to see additional interim,
Yep.
or look at interim.
And that's easy to say sitting around a table in
It's
a
not our
place
job
like
to do
that. It's not, but I don't mind. I don't think it's wrong for us to be pushing to start seeing that action.
That's our
So,
job to push, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think along those same lines, and my questions are really in the, what is our interim management plan?
Mhm.
As opposed to, okay, so we got the last study, and now the next step is the next study. Well, how are we going to manage it in the meantime? Did we budget, because we didn't budget for it last year. And we probably knew last year that we wouldn't have the survey in time, and we wouldn't have a solution in time. And so June 15th,
I'm not sure that
The-
they didn't totally think that it was in the budget, or they started running low on rec funds and thought they would be doing it before the end of the year. Because what she said was, they ended up doing it in this fiscal year anyway, and she did have the funds, so.
but so then I question,
yeah.
how does that work in terms of the mechanics? Did we still make a transfer from AFC reserves to the rec department?
Which would have fallen
The-
back to free cash
go back to
as
free
if it
cash?
stayed in our reserve.
Yeah.
Either way, if it isn't spent, it
June
falls to free
15th,
cash.
Right, she waited until almost the end
Yeah.
of the year to say, and I say she, I don't mean,
Right.
right. But I just think big picture, I'm all for doing the study and figuring out a long-term solution. In the meantime, I think we need to be proactively planning for the management of our resources, not just waiting to see what the study tells us. Because we know we're not going to have the study before we have to do something next summer.
I think it's
And
fair
we
to
should
say
have
we're
known
going to
in
be doing that.
2001.
We're going to do that treatment next summer. It should be in the
Right.
fiscal '25 budget,
Right.
because it's going to be after July 1st.
And I'm no scientist, but I can tell you the study is already gonna ask for more people or more studies.
Right.
But,
Well, that's
you know,
what they do.
The-
yeah.
They'll
Study's
fill in
gonna-
some more details, like, to come later,
Yeah.
but you can be assured that's gonna be part of it.
And I guess I mean, it is sort of a piecewise thing, but also, I mean, Jennifer's new to the department, so she wasn't she didn't start the first plan, and maybe she would have said, hey, let's do a bigger thing. But then you gotta come to people with an even bigger ask in the beginning, you know, and say, I need $50,000 to study this.
But I mean, I think you should, right? Candidly, if we know it's going to be $50,000, we shouldn't piacemeal it out so that
Well,
it looks like a smaller
well, they may
amount.
have
We
made
should be
the
candid
claim-
and upfront about here's what our investment is, because by the time we have it, we'll be $100,000 into it.
Yeah.
$50,000 in studies and 4 treatments at $15,000 apiece.
But also, they may not, I mean, unless you know I mean, I think you probably could have guessed that stuff was in the pond by the algae bloom. But if you didn't know that, you might not do this other study.
So I actually watched her select board presentation where she basically
Yeah.
said, and then the study said exactly what we thought the study was gonna say.
Right.
And I was like,
Right. Well, I mean, it does help to have good data, because you're ultimately going to go to some of the, whoever is causing the problem, and you're going to have
It's
data
true.
to back it up.
if it
on.
is Del Webb, you're gonna wanna show up with some sort of support
Yeah.
that didn't come from.
And apparently Del Webb's choking a whole other
I mean-
watershed, so, yeah, we'll find out where it's coming from, the hockey.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'm excited to see the root cause. Let's figure it out, fix it.
Yeah, like, I mean,
So are
that-
you in the watershed?
the worst thing is if it's like, you know, it's only 10% from 9 things, you know, that's harder to solve, I think, than,
Right.
you know, find this is, you know, 30% or 40% is coming from the fact that we, you know, throw stuff on the soccer field or
So
something.
you should take bets. I'm gonna bet on the soccer field.
Yeah, I know you. That's your goal, so to speak.
That's my goal.
Melanie, anything? Otherwise, we'll go to a vote.
No, I'm, you know, you'll see what my vote is, but I think y'all discussed it enough to make me feel good about my vote, only because I can't imagine that an initial study was done without looking at the outside environmental factors. So coming back for more money just seems, they should have asked for all the money up front, but whatever.
Okay. Any others? That's a good point. Let's start with Melanie.
Board, no.
Bradley, yes?
Brant, yes.
Jane?
Oh, clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Shafford, yes.
That's what you- Leslie, yes. Okay, so it's 6-1. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. That's for that. Let me stop sharing that. Go back to the agenda because we have minutes to deal with. Okay. Are there any other comments regarding warrant or upcoming meetings? we now have a date with at least the police chief, fire chief, and we'll see if the police chief can come too. Okay, I'll go to liaison reports. Anybody have anything new? Seeing none. I just want to tell people that there is an open house at the library tomorrow night.
16.
And they are planning on, the architect's planning on being there and I think sharing some information and gathering information and doing some surveys on repairs. So I will be out of town, but there might be something of interest for people to attend and get some information on that. Next up would be a motion to approve the minutes of August 31st. If someone wants to make that.
Bradley voting, motion to approve the minutes from
August 31st.
meeting number 2, August 31st.
Great. And a second?
Brant, second.
Okay, Brant on the second. Any discussion of the minutes? Another nice job. And in that case, still roll call. Melanie?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Ford, abstain.
Okay.
Bradley, yes?
Brant, yes.
Dolan,
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Well, I didn't know what an ooh was.
That's a 5-1 ooh.
That is 601. With,
And
Ms.
incidentally,
Ford
I
abstaining.
don't think she abstained, but I think you're allowed to vote on minutes if you think that they're accurate and they're complete,
Correct.
as I did, so.
You
of
don't
course
have
you're
to.
welcome- yeah.
You don't have to have attended the meeting, but it's up to you to decide
It's true,
if
so
you're
I
comfortable
just,
doing that.
yeah, as long as, yeah.
Yes, it's
Just a
fine.
heads up.
Particularly now that you can either watch the things or just read them. So, okay. Anybody have anything else? If not, our next meeting is let's see, Monday night. So you get a weekend off. We'll be back here Monday night with the Westborough TV and the town manager. And I will.
Could we get is there any update on ARPA funds, or is it still the last? I guess I'd be curious just where we stand on ARPA funds.
I would.
I probably asked it.
I can ask
like
Christie if she
2
would
months
have
ago.
any
It probably hasn't
information on that.
changed, but,
Yes, I can ask.
Okay.
A motion to adjourn, someone?
yeah. Motion to adjourn?
Second, Bradley, second.
Okay, roll call again. Melanie?
Ford, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Shafford, yes.
Leslie, yes. Hey, we got good at it by the end. All right, 700. We are adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV.